This is a Fox News alert on new additions to President-elect Donald Trump's White House team, as more staff announcements could come at any time. We'll keep you posted on that. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kennedy, and here today, it's Dagen McDowell of the Fox Business Network, Democratic strategist Julie Roginsky, and we've also got National Review reporter Katherine Timpf on the couch, and of course today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, the luckiest guy of all, the political editor for townhall.com. It's Guy Benson, and Guy is outnumbered. Welcome back to the couch, Guy.
I'm so thankful, one might say, to be here.
Are you full of turkey, or have you shaken off the tryptophan coma, and are you ready to wrestle with the news?
I am so happy I fit into the suit today, to be honest. Here we are. Let's do this.
Okay. I had to use Preparation H on my face this morning because one eye was completely swollen shut from the sodium. That was brilliant.
That's so much information, honey.
Lovely
Thanks for that tip.
It works, Guy.
Okay, well, and more TV tips for you and your post-turkey haze. All right, President-elect Donald Trump spending Thanksgiving working from Florida, making new staffing picks. The newest name, Betsy DeVos, tapped to head the Department of Education. She is a top Republican donor and a school choice activist. Mr. Trump also expected to nominate billionaire Wilbur Ross as Commerce Secretary and Cubs co-owner Todd Ricketts as Deputy Commerce Secretary. This, as an internal battle appears to be intensifying over whether Rudy Giuliani or Mitt Romney should be Secretary of State. Senior advisor Kellyanne Conway even weighing in. And now we've got Peter Ducey live from Palm Beach, Florida. He's got the entire story. What's going on there, Peter?
Well, we know now, Kennedy, that the big concern about Mitt Romney among some ground-level Trump supporters is they just aren't sure if his attitude toward the president-elect is going to do a complete 180 and go from extreme Trump critic to cooperative cabinet member. You just mentioned the other contender thought to be toward the top of Mr. Trump's list to be the Secretary of State is Rudy Giuliani. A New York Times report today says that Giuliani is now frustrated he's not the front runner, and this morning on a conference call, transition officials tried to downplay any drama. They stressed that all the palace intrigue surrounding the Secretary of State pick is overblown. But things were really intriguing this Thanksgiving when advisor Kellyanne Conway, who wields a lot of behind-the-scenes influence, who has made a point to call out Republicans who never really embraced Trump the candidate, tweeted what many are seeing now as a slight against Mitt Romney. She wrote that she's been getting a lot of notes from people concerned about him, and then she added this, quote, Kissinger and Schultz as secretaries of state flew around the world less, counseled POTUS close to home more, and were loyal. Good checklist. This morning, Conway was also doing her best to highlight the diversity in Mr. Trump's cabinet selections since arriving in Palm Beach. It's two women, Governor Nikki Haley to be UN ambassador and philanthropist Betsy DeVos for Education Secretary. We're told not to expect any more cabinet-level announcements today here at Mar-a-Lago, but that we will learn two important staff members, so stay tuned for that.
All right, Peter, thanks so much. And please keep us updated if anything else happens there in beautiful Palm Beach, Florida. Guy, I will go to you. Some interesting picks. Betsy DeVos, of course, Secretary of Education nominee. And there were some other names thrown about, like Michelle Rhee and Eva Moskowitz. But let's talk about Secretary of State, because this is the big one. We're getting a lot of names, a lot of trickle, a lot of conversation. What do you think is going to happen with the Mitt question?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I'm an admirer of Governor Romney's. I think he's a statesman. I think he's someone who's very capable and would be calm and cool on the world stage. I can understand why Team Trump, at least elements within that camp, may be concerned about Mitt, because he was not just a Trump critic. He was perhaps Trump critic in chief on the right, and was really going after him very hard throughout the entire primary process and really throughout the general election as well. And he ended up voting third party himself. So whether or not Trump holds that against him remains to be seen. A lot of people talked about the importance of loyalty to Trump. If that is the prime factor here, then you would imagine it would be someone like Rudy. If Trump can get over that and bring Mitt into the fold, you know, we're talking about a changed ball game. Although this talk about how Mitt might have to give an apology to Trump in order to get this, I mean, that's absurd.
Well,
Mitt should never apologize.
This is the thing that I will say about that, Kat. You know, he made this public speech. It was the first time people saw an aggressive Mitt Romney. Maybe that's the case that Romney fans could make for having him be our chief diplomat. Is, you know, perhaps now he knows how to talk tough and get things done. What do you see happening?
Perhaps. It is a little strange, given that Romney wasn't just somebody who, when he was asked about Trump, responded negatively. He filled up his schedule with times to talk negatively about Trump. But at the same time, you know, the election's over, and I really think that somebody like Romney would better balance out Trump than Giuliani. I feel that would be a little bit too intense for everybody involved.
Well, he is a big personality, obviously, and, you know, when his presidential hopes were dashed in Florida some years ago. Now, Julie, you have surveyed the landscape here in the Northeast, in New Jersey and New York for many years. If Giuliani is the most loyal person that Donald Trump has next to him, if he has been with him through thick and thin, through every scandal and misstep, why hasn't he already been named Secretary of State?
Maybe because he's totally unqualified to be Secretary of State. Maybe because, aside from being mayor of New York, which is not exactly the most ambassadorial job in America.
Very international city, though.
It is a very international city. So is Las Vegas. Doesn't mean that the mayor of Vegas gets to be Secretary of State. It means that what Giuliani said is, well, I'm qualified because I've traveled around a lot, as much as Hillary Clinton. Yeah, doing business with foreign governments and doing business with companies.
10% of his business was with foreign governments.
Fine, that's 10% more than
out
it should
of 100.
Be. Doesn't matter.
So 90% was with companies.
Actually, we don't know.
Just to correct that.
We don't know that because he actually hasn't released his tax returns, much like everybody else hasn't released them either, including our president.
Well, that's what he's. You have to go on what he says at this point. He said 10%, and he's never lobbied the U.S. government on behalf of any
Listen,
clients.
let me tell you something. He's done a lot of. So you don't have to be a registered lobbyist to pull strings and pull connections. And we all know how Rudy Giuliani makes.
Oh, now you've got Now liberals have religion on that.
Wait, I'm sorry, Dagen. Let me say this. You want to drain the swamp? Start with Rudy Giuliani. I'm not the one running around saying drain the swamp, drain the swamp. I'm not the one appointing super PAC billionaires to high-profile positions. That's not me. That's the person that wanted to drain the swamp.
I mean, but you could also argue that Mitt Romney is an establishment person.
You've got a billionaire who's an heiress who came into her money, who's running the Commerce Department now, and you've got a billionaire who earned his money, Wilbur Ross, who's going to be running the Commerce Department under Donald Trump.
Drain the swamp.
I do think that the issue with I will add that the issue with Rudy Giuliani has to do with some of the business that he conducted under Giuliani Partners. But what I love about this whole affair is that you have individuals, seasoned, experienced people openly campaigning for these jobs. You've got Rudy Giuliani, who wants it and is willing to talk about it. He talked to the Wall Street Journal more than once. And one thing that Newt Gingrich and Governor Mike Huckabee have sounded about Mitt Romney is this is a guy who ran for president twice, and he wanted the top job. Is he going to be representing Donald Trump as the Secretary of State, or is he going to be acting like he won the election and not Trump?
I think you could argue that Mitt Romney is a patriotic person and that he would be representing the country. And I think there are a lot of people, especially overseas, who are very comfortable with the idea of Mitt Romney as Secretary of State.
People that are uncomfortable with Giuliani.
Never, ever underestimate the size of someone's ego and how it can get in the way of conducting business, whether it's in an office or whether it's in the private
Everyone
sector.
in politics has an ego, or else you wouldn't do it.
And also, if he had such a big ego, he would have run independently. If he really thought that he were the concentration of greatness that could save this country as president, he would have run.
Unless he cares more about saving his money and knowing that it's a complete waste.
Let me just say this about Romney versus Rudy, and this is what's very interesting to me. Rudy, we know, Dagen pointed out, he doesn't do a lot of business with foreign governments, according to him. He does do business with people who are very close to foreign governments. So he did a lot of business with a Russian company that is essentially an extension of Vladimir Putin, as all oligarchs in Russia are. So just because he wasn't paid by the Russian government doesn't mean he wasn't paid by somebody who's at the mercy of the Russian government. The reason I bring this up is because you have Michael Flynn, who does also have a financial relationship with Russia Today, which is a propaganda arm of Vladimir Putin.
So does Larry King.
But listen, so does Larry King.
Support him?
Luckily for us, Larry King's not going anywhere into the administration. But I will say this. What's interesting is that for Donald Trump, who I think has been pacifying Putin tremendously over the course of the last year and a half, to appoint somebody like Mitt Romney would send a very interesting message, whether he could appoint somebody who has said proactively and consistently that he thinks Russia is the largest geopolitical threat facing the world.
And he got mocked for it.
I want to ask Guy about this. I want to bring you in here because the Russia question is huge right now. The Obama administration, has talked about North Korea being the biggest threat. We're going to talk about that later in the show. But how important is it to have a strong Secretary of State who understands the threat that Russia poses, like a John Bolton, like a Mitt Romney, or, do you want to have someone who is more of a businessman like Donald Trump, who's going to maybe work together with Russia and more of a partnership?
Well, I think you want someone as America's top diplomat who looks at our friends and adversaries and enemies with clear eyes, morally. And I think that, I'm not going to sit here and judge who can and who cannot do that. I think Mitt Romney clearly, vis-a-vis Russia, did and was savaged for it by the left 4 years ago, and he was right about all of that. And again, he and Trump don't see eye to eye necessarily on Russian issues. So one thing that I've heard a lot is, Romney may be the front runner for Secretary of State. If there are people bellyaching about that, loyalists like Huckabee, like Newt or whatever.
Publicly, shockingly so.
Correct. But if the Trump team decides, all right, we want Mitt somewhere, but maybe not at Secretary of State because it's such a high-profile, high-power position. This is my hobby horse. I'm going to stay on the hobby horse until it's dead. I would love to see Mitt Romney at the VA. He's a turnaround artist. He fixes broken things.
Look what he did with the Olympics, which we've talked
about.
He came in, it was almost $400 million deficit, and he did an audit, and he just started cleaning it up, and he turned it around in spectacular fashion.
And our veterans deserve a lot better than they're getting.
And you know what? Our veterans do, and our kids in school do. And Betsy DeVos, given the work that she's done in the past, huge proponent of charter schools and vouchers. As the Wall Street Journal editorial page says today, she's going to bust up the political cartel that is a Department of
and all
Education.
the teachers unions getting this upset is the best indication.
That's absolutely right, Kat. That is the best glimmer of hope we've got.
They're outraged, beholden to the unions and beholden to liberals.
Yeah, and she said that, yes, she's worked for organizations that support Common Core. She personally does not. That's going to make a lot of parents happy, and having choice, whether it's vouchers or charter schools, can only improve education in this country. So, much remains to be seen with this cabinet as it's forming. And guess what? A new survey shows American consumers are the most hopeful they've been in a decade. That's great news for people shopping today and selling stuff, too. This is the Dow approaching yet another record high. So is President-elect Trump's win behind this renewed optimism, or are there other factors at play? Plus, Mr. Trump's team firing back as liberal groups push for recounts in at least 3 states. Will their efforts succeed, or is this just more sour grapes after losing the election? So much to discuss on this Black Friday. Welcome to it.
This Fox News alert with less than an hour left until the closing bell on Wall Street. It's a shortened trading day, by the way. A live look at the Dow hitting new all-time highs today on this short trading day. Also, other broad market gauges. The Dow's up more than 7% since Election Day, closing above 19,000 for the first time earlier this week. We got a consumer sentiment survey out finding that optimism is surging this month, rated at nearly 94 compared to just above 87 back in October. That University of Michigan survey also finding Americans are the most hopeful that they've been in more than a decade. More than a third of households say they expect their personal finances to improve next year. Kennedy, we talk about this stuff on the Fox Business Network all the time. It's a Trump rally, like it or not. I know that a lot of Democrats are still crying over Hillary losing, but the Russell 2000, the small cap index through Wednesday, is up more than 12% since Donald Trump was elected.
Yeah, you've got the 4 major indexes that are operating, all showing these massive gains and record highs. And it's interesting because Gallup did a survey of consumer confidence and finds that people are confident across the board. It's not just Republicans who are confident that they've got someone in office who's going to make this shift, and we're going to see a change in power, a change in party power. It's people across the board, and it's nice to see because it feels like for so many years since 2008, we've been reporting very glum news this time of year, and sales just have not been as high as you would hope, especially for some of these small retailers. This year, there's going to be phenomenal online numbers, and Black Monday appears to be it's going to have its biggest shopping day online in the history of the interweb.
Well, people who didn't support Trump, a lot of them didn't support him for personal reasons. They thought he was a bad guy, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't have to necessarily think someone's a good guy to have faith that he might be able to do good things for the economy. So it makes sense.
Well, Guy, this rally is based on the hope that tax reform happens both on the individual side and on the corporate side, that there is a big rollback in regulations. The tax cuts and the rollback in regulations, they flow right to a business's bottom line. So this is not fantasy land, if you will, in terms of the buying that's going on. And again, it's a change in what we've seen over the last 8 years.
Yeah, and I think part of it also is this awful election is finally behind us. There's a sigh of relief from a lot of people. And remember when President Obama won, there were really good days on Wall Street as well. That was a change election. This was a change election. People were unhappy with the status quo, even though, look, there were some positive developments in the economy over the last 8 years.
Sure.
Some of them were really sluggish. And, you know, we can talk about the Obama recovery being really, really weak, which it was, but it was still, you know, a recovery. Now there's a hope among a lot of people, Republicans, Democrats, everyone in between, saying, all right, whether we like the guy or not, we weren't happy with the trajectory of the country. It is going to change, and now we're starting to feel a little bit better. And the Democrats will say, oh, Trump will have an opportunity to build on the progress that President Obama has made.
We set you up for this.
Right. Whereas Republicans will say, finally, a guy who agrees with us in office, we're feeling better. So I think there's some bipartisanship there.
Well, I love the irony, though, of, say, Congresswoman Maxine Waters calling the stock rally appalling when she referred to it as appalling. I think it was like a week ago when the market was hitting records, Julie, under President Obama, and the Democrats loved that.
I'm thrilled the market's hitting records. I just hope that it hits records and pays dividends, not just for shareholders, but people in Ohio and people in Pennsylvania and Michigan who voted for Donald Trump, who are in manufacturing, who expect the jobs to come back, who expect him to keep Carrier here and not send it to Mexico, who expect him to make America great again. Look, the market rally is great for people, and I know you've pointed out the fact that a lot of people have their portfolios invested in the market.
Through their
401ks invested in the
401ks,
market. 401ks, which is fantastic. But oftentimes, we've seen this certainly during the Obama recovery, what you see in the market does not necessarily get reflected down to working people or the same people that voted for Trump. And so I hope sincerely that those people derive some benefit and some dividends from this.
Yeah, it's not the only indicator. And
Right.
you know, we saw that with Obama because when the stock market was doing well, and it seemed like jobs, all the jobs numbers were heading in the right direction, but these were part-time jobs. You know, these were not full, robust, full-time jobs.
And wages were stagnant for
stagnant wages
a
and
large part of the last 8
really
years.
sluggish GDP growth. So if you can combine, you know, this continued market rally, and there are economists who say that it's really at the top of the arc, unfortunately, and you know, you never know. I mean, that's the kind of prognostication you never know. But hopefully, combined with GDP growth, we will see the economy improve, no matter who's president.
Can I just say very briefly? I also hate this idea of attributing all the good and all the bad in the economy to one person.
Yeah.
On either side.
Yes.
And both parties do this. When something's good, they say it's our guy. When it's bad, it's that guy. The president, of course, sets the tone. He sets a lot of policy. It's very important. But I think we go a little bit overboard saying this is all Trump, or this is all Obama.
You're in luck because you guys have everything now. You've got the House, you've got the Senate, you've got the White House, you're about to get the courts.
I know, it's great.
He's going to influence potentially the Fed and Janet Yellen. He's certainly trying to. So, hey, Pottery Barn rule, you break, you own it. You own it now. Hopefully the market and the economy do well. It's all on you.
Was that Giuliani's policing philosophy?
I believe that was Colin Powell's invasion of Iraq philosophy, but I'm going to attribute it now to the Republicans controlling everything in our lives.
Obamacare for you guys, now it's a Republican's turn.
The election of the Republicans, Senate, House, and to the presidency says that we think that companies and individuals make better decisions with their money than Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and anybody in Washington.
Amen.
And I will say this, if you buy a stock, you have an ownership stake in that great American corporation. When you buy a treasury bond, you are loaning money to those bags in Washington and giving it to bureaucrats to spend on your behalf. You're loaning money to Uncle Sam rather than own a stake in a company.
Repeal Dodd-Frank and the Fed and really let the economy
Says the libertarian.
All right, Team Trump slamming efforts by liberals to seek a recount in 3 key states that the president-elect won. Green Party candidate Jill Stein has raised nearly $5 million. Why couldn't she do that for her presidential run? That's all she's raised so far to request a recount. That's just for a recount in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. The effort coming after reports of the possibility of hacking on electronic voting machines in those states. But Trump's senior advisor Kellyanne Conway tweeting, quote, "Look who can't accept the election results," with a link to an article about Hillary Clinton supporters calling for an audit. I think this is very clever that Hillary Clinton and her minions are getting, you know, this poor Green Party candidate who was ignored by the mainstream media, who was maligned by so many operatives of Hillary Clinton, and now they're getting Jill Stein to do their dirty work.
Well, first of all, I spoke to some Hillary Clinton people who are fairly high up, and they are saying that they're not involved in this at all.
I guess we'll find out in the next batch of John Podesta emails.
Because we'll find out, yes, thank you, the next time they leak my other cell phone number. When we find out exactly who's behind this, I think it's Jill Stein. Don't forget, Jill Stein's the one that said Donald Trump poses less of a threat to the nation than Hillary Clinton does. She's not a Hillary Clinton supporter.
Jill Stein,
she's also, I'm sorry, let me just finish this. She is using this to raise money. This is a total scam. By the way, any Democrats who are watching, liberals who are watching, don't send Jill Stein money.
See,
it is a total,
there they go again. They're still maligning Jill Stein, the other woman running for president.
If you give $1 to Jill Stein, it is the equivalent of throwing it into the belly of a portisane for this voter fraud thing, which I know that guy.
It's not voter fraud. It's, come on, he won the election. Can we just move on?
Yeah, well, you know, what else is she going to do? You know, she's got nothing to do. This is a nice little thing for her to do now. She's got the money.
It's a hobby.
It worked. She did a great job somehow. Enough people just can't believe what happened that they actually are donating her money. But, you know, it's not like it was close. So you're right. I don't understand it either, but people still have not come to terms with the fact that it was fair.
Well, you've written about this.
Yeah.
It's not voter fraud. It's ridiculous, ironic conspiracy theories.
It is. That's exactly what it is. And there's a sucker born every day, and apparently a lot of them are donating to this ridiculous quixotic effort, which is going to go nowhere. Donald Trump won. Get over it. And to their credit, it's not just conservatives like me saying this. Some folks who study this stuff, Nate Silver, Nate Cohn at the New York Times, sort of elections gurus on the left, have looked at this and said there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever of hacking.
And Julie's saying it.
Yeah, well, and they're talking about Wisconsin.
But Nate Silver and I got everything wrong, so listen to us, because we know what we're talking about.
But to your point, you know, Nate Silver and others are saying it's not just the voting machine. Sure, she may have been down 7 percentage points in areas where they happen to use this technology, but you also have to look at the shifting demographics.
That's right.
And this election, frankly, was weird.
Yes.
You know, you had people who weren't supposed to be voting for certain candidates flipping sides. I mean, there were entire counties that saw 30% shifts.
From Obama
and there are so many people
Obama
on the left looking to blame absolutely anybody. They're not looking at what they can change.
Yeah.
They're making excuses here, excuses there. It's like if you have a friend who just, you know, if a guy breaks up with you, they're like, he's a jerk. He doesn't, instead of being like, hey, maybe you should have not called 911 when he didn't text you back right away. You know, you got to look at yourself.
Wait, are you looking through my diary? What's going on?
Wait, you keep a diary. I want to just point out something about that Nate Cohn actually tweeted. The issue was Wisconsin.
Right.
That a lot of these conspiracy theorists were pointing to, and he said in states that use paper ballots, Iowa and Minnesota, the results look exactly the same.
That's right. And these are nearby states with very similar demographics. And when you look at the patterns, these are paper ballots, so not hackable.
Right.
The patterns were the same. So there's nothing here.
Can I just say one last thing to my liberal friends, any of whom may be watching? We got to move on. This election is over. Donald Trump won the Electoral College fair and square. You may not like it. You want to invest your money, you want to invest your energy, invest it in 2018 and then in 2020. Move on. This is nonsense. Jill Stein is using you for her own financial reasons. It's a total crop.
I was hugging it. Hey, I was hugging it out a lot over the last couple of days with all my friends. I mean, they had that look on their face, but they'd stopped talking about Hillary losing. Thank goodness.
Like I said, long, uncomfortable hugs. Make everything
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I give the most uncomfortable hugs.
Yes.
That's not true. You've hugged me, and it's been great. Not uncomfortable at all, Dagen McDowell.
Hugging it out.
All right, President-elect Donald Trump getting 2 intelligence briefings since the election. Not 2 per day. 2 total. Is that enough to get him up to speed on the crises around the world? We're going to talk about what his team has to say. Plus, holiday shoppers are pounding the aisles looking for great deals. Here's a live shot of a mall in West Nyack, New York. Look at that. Boots on the ground. Some of the season's hottest items are going on sale today. We're going to have a live report in moments. Stay with us.
Oh, yeah. You better shop around. Shop around.
No problem, guys.
All right, President-elect Donald Trump's team now pushing back after critics say his 2 intelligence briefings since the election are not enough. But members of Trump's team say the president-elect is focused on the transition and still has time to get up to speed on international affairs and security threats. Meantime, sources telling the Wall Street Journal that the Obama administration warned President-elect Trump a nuclear North Korea should be his biggest national security priority when he gets into office. So, are 2 briefings enough? Are they making more out of this than necessary?
Well, all I would ask as you look at this story through whatever lens you want to is for some intellectual consistency and honesty. Because when President Obama, there were all these reports about Obama skipping briefings left and right the day after Benghazi, for example.
As president.
As president, and people went nuts. on our side and criticized him very harshly. So if you're going to apply that standard to President Obama, I think it's fair to ask similar questions and ask, why is President-elect Trump not doing this at the clip that others have, his predecessors have at this stage? Because there's a lot to catch up on by the time you get sworn in on January the 20th. Now, the good news is Mike Pence is going every single day getting this stuff. And I think some of the idea behind the Trump presidency all along, that if he won, he would be a manager and a delegator and that kind of thing. I hope eventually he gets around to it, because they say, oh, well, he's busy with the transition. The president's always going to be busy with a lot of stuff. Taking national security briefings virtually every day must be a priority for the commander-in-chief, as far as I'm concerned, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat.
All right, so will Mike Pence operate as Waylon Smithers to Donald Trump's Montgomery Burns? And will he be whispering in his ear every time that they meet someone? It's a city in Syria, sir. That's what Aleppo is.
Oh, are we talking about President Gary Johnson, or are we talking
about...
No, sorry, that was too soon.
Too soon. Too soon. Very, very wounded. What do you think of
President
this?
Gary Johnson, say it again, because that's never happening.
So I largely agree with everything Guy said. Ultimately, Donald Trump has never held public office before. Mike Pence has been a congressman. I don't know what committees he served on in the House, but I hope that he had some sort of exposure. Certainly, Barack Obama was a senator when he became president. He didn't have much experience, but he had some experience with being in Washington and dealing with these issues. Donald Trump has not, and his only experience internationally has been with business deals that he's made with some of the people he's had time to talk to on the phone since his election. And optically or not, it doesn't look good when he's got permits being approved in Argentina after he gets off the phone with the president of Argentina, or in India when he's had
meetings with real estate developers.
But he doesn't have the time to get briefed. Listen, it's a scary, scary world out there. He doesn't know much about it, not because he's a dummy, but because he's never served in public office before.
Well, how kind of the Obama administration to try and hold his hand on North Korea.
They should.
He talked to President Park on the phone, and her office said that he pledged, quote, "We will be steadfast and strong with respect to working with you to protect against the instability in North Korea." And I'm talking about President Park of South Korea. And by the way, it's because the Obama administration did jack all to stop the growth of the nuclear program in North Korea.
Under Bush, you know that, right?
Pardon me?
It went nuclear under Bush. So
I know, but they had 8 years, and now they're giving Donald Trump advice about North Korea and about China. I just think I find it a little bit rich.
I think that he at least needs to go to the, Pence is going. Pence is not the commander-in-chief. Right. And even in terms of, people are freaking out about how little experience Trump has in these areas. Even if he is saying he's going to be a delegator, I'm sure that that's true. Maybe him and Mike Pence are comparing notes at a coffee shop after Pence goes. I don't know. But even in terms of optics, you got to go to more than two.
I agree. You have to go to more than two. And as president, you're going to have to do a bunch of stuff at once. So work on the transition, get the daily briefings. You'll feel better. You'll know what you're getting into. Everyone will feel better.
But it's being portrayed as if every time an intelligence issue might come up in his presence, he's like, la, 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 la. I don't
think so.
And that's too far the other way, of course. But again, nobody would be saying these kinds of things if he just, go more than two. More than two.
That's absolutely right. New concerns about protecting America's police force. A shocking new report showing gun-related deaths are up by nearly 70% from a year ago, including the officer that died the day gunmen targeted law enforcement in 4 different cities. So what's behind the surge in violence? We'll get into that in moments.
The number of law enforcement officers shot to death in the line of duty up about 2/3 over last year. 60 officers fatally shot in the United States so far this year. That is a 67% surge, according to data posted by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. 20 of those deaths are considered ambushes. The latest of those ambush-style killings was Detective Benjamin Marconi with the San Antonio Police Force. He was one of 4 officers shot across 4 cities in just one day earlier this week. And remember the chaos in Dallas last summer where an Army veteran ambushed and killed 5 officers? Police say he was angry about the string of police shootings of innocent black men. Guy, what do we do to stop it? And is it rhetoric that's driving it?
I don't like blaming rhetoric for political violence or politically motivated violence, because then we go down a very slippery slope where we start blaming people's thoughts and free speech for the terrible actions of criminals or madmen. Just on this issue generally, obviously when you sign up to be a police officer, you know to some extent you're putting your life at risk. It's part of the job. And that's why we're so grateful as Americans for what they do for us. What really is so upsetting about these new statistics is the number of these deaths are not like, oh, robbers get caught up and start shooting, and it's sort of in the line of duty, someone gets hurt or killed. These are people intentionally targeting our police, ambushing cops.
Assassination.
That's what it is. And I was talking with some NYPD officers just the other day. I was in Brooklyn for a basketball game, and we were chatting. They gave me some directions that I needed. And it just occurred to me, these guys would get a call on their radio at any second to go somewhere, and they will race there as fast as they can to go help someone. And there's a chance, a non-zero chance, tragically, that someone at the other end is waiting for them to try to do harm to them. And, I mean, that is why, you know, we get all involved in these Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. These folks are some of the best that our society has to offer. It doesn't say that there aren't excesses. The police are not always right about everything, and people who commit crime should be held to account. But overall, our police are incredible, and these stories just break my heart.
Well, Kennedy, don't you think that if we got more direction, at least in the way that all of our leaders speak about the value of what police officers do to us, would it stop that? How do you stop this?
Yeah, I think, you know what? I think it's interesting because the way Hillary Clinton talked about police officers in this country, it resonated with more than just cops. You know, because I really feel like she was pandering to a part of her base that she already had secured. And I find it to be really irresponsible because, you know, and I've said this so many times, Julie and I agree a lot about this. We need to have meaningful criminal justice reform in this country. We really do. But the fact that we need that is in no way justification for this kind of murder, you know, these kind of assassinations. And I do think it's irresponsible. You know, I think it's one thing to set the tone and what you say and how you say it. And I think there are a lot of people who have friends and neighbors and relatives who are cops. And they see the way that a lot of these elected officials, particularly on the left, disparage them. And, you know, in a blanket fashion, dismiss what they do and how they do it. And I think that adds to the unease and the instability of the very few people who go out and hurt cops.
Right, and you can have your opinions on criminal justice reform. I agree that there's a lot to be done there. And you can have specific complaints about the police or the way law enforcement works, but these officers are people. They're individuals with families, and that's obviously something that we need to talk about rather than just vilifying the police force in general. Again, you can't blame rhetoric, but obviously there's something going on if it's happening more often.
You can blame incitement. If there's direct incitement, obviously. But I think it's, you have to be careful.
In general, I don't like to blame rhetoric for things like this. You don't hear something and then go out and kill somebody without having something else going on.
Yeah, you know, I'll just echo everything that you said, Kennedy, which is there's a place for criminal justice reform. You and I feel very strongly about it. It doesn't mean that you wake up one day and take out your anger and animosity against the very people who, by the way, oftentimes are protecting the very community that you come from. And so I think that's very, very important to bear in mind. Everybody needs to take a deep breath and realize the police, even if you have some bad officers and some bad apples that you personally don't like, as a whole, as you said, Guy, are here to protect us. They are running into the fire, running into the situation where we're all running out. And that's important to bear in mind.
Imagine your life, your community, and the chaos if the police were not there for you at every turn. Thanks, guys. As President-elect Trump prepares to move on to the White House, his wife, Melania Trump, defying the norm with her plan to become the first long-distance First Lady. What will this mean for the Trump family? That's next.
Melania Trump breaking the mold with her plans to be the first long-distance First Lady, at least for a little while. President-elect Trump telling reporters his wife will stay behind in New York City at least until June so the couple's 10-year-old son, Barron, can finish school. Earlier this year, she told Us Weekly that her son is the priority and she wants to maintain some normalcy for him. All right, Kennedy, should we be protesting this in the street, or is this maybe no big deal?
I think on one hand, I think it's wonderful that she's choosing to keep his life as normal as possible, because his life is going to be turned upside down, you know. And as a parent who was traveling across the country every single week,
right,
it was a tough decision to decide whether or not I was going to keep doing that for 6 more months or move to New York City in the middle of the school year. We chose to do exactly what she's doing, and I think there are a lot of moms who have a great deal of respect for that. I feel bad for some of the people in their building who are now going to have to be subject to the Secret Service surveillance state.
Absolutely.
And I understand that the traffic's going to be rough, but, you know, it's like, well, who are we to say?
Yeah, I mean, plus it's for maybe till the end of the school year. I mean, maybe she'll reassess it then. What do you think about it?
I mean, this is not a story that I can get all that worked up about. And again, going back to the intellectual consistency thing that I was talking about earlier, we heard from a lot of people on the left for the last 8 years that conservative complaints about lavish, expensive overseas vacations or to Hawaii or whatever for the Obamas, that was petty, that was nasty, you shouldn't question that sort of thing. This is just a mother and a father making a decision for their child. It's going to cost taxpayers more. Yes, it will. And that's something that we can acknowledge. But I don't think it's a scandal. I think it's a reasonable family decision being made in the best interest of that child who's been swept up in this surreal experience of his father being elected president.
How about not judging the decisions that a mother and a father make about their kid? Right? And that's what it boils down to, is this is their decision, period. And I agree with you that when President Obama would go to Martha's Vineyard and people would criticize him for being on vacation or being away, I hated it when the left did it to George Bush when he'd be at the ranch. Regardless, I just think these men and their families, they work hard, they're under a lot of pressure. If they need to be away, then, you know, take a vacation.
Melania strikes me somebody who didn't ask for this, didn't want it. By all accounts, likes her life. I think got swept up in this. By all accounts, is a fabulous mother from everything that we've heard about her. And I'm actually happy to say that we haven't heard much about her, which is wonderful, because I think she values her privacy. If she wants to stay in New York, let her stay in New York. And if this little boy wants to
that's why I found it.
Let him do it. The only thing I will say is it will cost taxpayers, I think, $3 million. Secret Service will have to pay an extra $3 million to Donald Trump to lease the top 2 floors of Trump Tower. So let's acknowledge that if we were going to be hypocritical about how much money Obama was going to spend on his vacations, we can acknowledge this is going to cost taxpayers also, as you said, Guy. But other than that, in terms of her decision and the decision that she makes for this little boy, God, leave him alone.
You know, he's a little kid, and
Leave
he's
him
essentially
alone.
an only child.
Yeah, leave him alone.
And we saw, you know, the Obama's children, they were quite young when they got into the White House. And, you know, the Bush children were a little bit older. Chelsea Clinton, I think, is a little bit more of a direct comparison. And it's always tricky. And it's
tricky for Amy Carter and the Carters living in the White House in the 70s. But one thing I wanted to add, what you said about Melania, I feel the same way. And it's why I hated that professional coat hanger Gigi Hadid making fun of her because it wasn't funny and it was mean.
I agree.
It was mean. It was very, very mean. And you know what? Nobody likes when people are mean. More Outnumbered in just a moment.
Thanks so much to our one luckiest guy, Guy Benson. Great to have you, Guy.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Aging in reverse, Benjamin Button. I love it.
Not about that.
You look good.
As always. Cute as a button as well.
I know, it's being very sweet.
All right, now everyone is free to go ahead and go shopping. We're back on Monday, noon Eastern, right here, happening now. Starts right now.